welcome to the garbage disposal installation. The first thing we want to do is cover up our floor. Well, before we cover up the floor, get our before photos. Make sure that you get the floor, the surrounding area, you get underneath here as well too. Get good visible pictures of the plumbing, the valves. That way we can see what kind of condition they're in, if there's any existing damage underneath the sink as well. Once we get our before photos, then we can cover up. Alright, we got our floor covered, and we also want to cover underneath the sink as well. That way we don't do any damage to the inside of the cabinet. Alright, we got our tools. We're just going to need a crescent wrench, a pipe wrench, or channel locks, and a screwdriver. So, we're going to have to remove the old one before we can put the new one in. So, the first thing that we're going to want to do is make sure that we got everything off, and then we can get ready to disassemble. So we have our drain line that we're going to have to disconnect from the disposal. So we can get that disconnected. Now, once we get that disconnected, we always want to take a paper towel, stuff down in there. I just start with a corner and just keep shoving it in there. Then I'll plug it up and prevent anything from leaking out of that drain hose. Once we do that, we can just get it out of the way. And then we can move on to the plumbing. I'm going to unplug this one. This one is corded, that's plugged into an outlet. They can also be hardwired as well. So, now we will start by disassembling the plumbing. We're just going to unscrew all of our nuts on our King plastic kit to remove all the pieces. Now, there's generally going to be some excess water in your J-bend of your P-trap here. So you're going to want to have a little bucket, a chamois, something underneath to catch the water. Get that disconnected, we can just go out and dump it. Alright, now that we got it dumped, we can start disassembling the rest of the pieces. So we got our P-trap off. off. Now we can get our top off. Which I'm going to disassemble this at the top. That way I can turn it. And I'll be able to get out the tailpiece. You don't ever want to pull, bend this. It's always got to turn and fit in perfectly with each other. You don't want to bend it. So now that I got it all set aside, the next step is to remove the disposal itself. So this is sitting on the strainer on the metal bracket up top here. So it's just twisted and spun up on there. So all we're going to have to do is just take it, grab the bottom metal bracket and twist it around to the left, and it will pop down. Once we get it popped down, we can set it to the side, and be careful not to tip it up because there's still going to be a little excess water in there. Once we get that out, our last step is we're going to have to remove our strainer. So, to remove our strainer, we got 3 screws that are underneath. We're going to have to loosen those up. I'm just loosening them down as far as they can go. You can take them out if you'd like. You don't have to, just as long as they're down all the way, because we're going to have to push this up in order to get the bracket off. So, now that I got it all the way unloosened, there is a little clip that is up underneath here on the bottom. So that little clip goes all the way around it. So what I'm going to have to do is there's a little break in the clip. I'm going to have to take my screwdriver, pop one side down. Once that side pops down, I can follow it around the back of the circle to get the other side down. So I found it where the break is, where it's split. Apply a little pressure to pop it off. Then I can follow around the circle. That is what's holding the bottom side of this strainer up. And now I can pop it off. So, now I got the bottom side off. I just want to try to loosen this up because it is stuck in here because of the plumber's putty. So I just try to break the plumber's putty around the bottom, break that seal, and that will allow me to pop it straight up. Alright, now it popped up. Got it popped out. Now my final step is cleaning out the top of this strainer. I want to clean out all this old residue, all this old putty at the top. That way it's nice and clean. When we put our new strainer on, it will make a good contact and seal properly. Alright, once we finish cleaning up the top, then we are good to proceed forward with our new garbage disposal. So we got our power cord, our disposal, our strainer. We have our plumbing attachment to attach to the side. In this case, how the plumbing was set up, there was a continuous waste kit that was put in to connect the two drains. So we're going to use the existing plumbing parts, which is pretty common when you're doing this. So, the first thing that I want to do is I'm going to put my new strainer on. So, to put my new strainer on, I got my base here, my base of it, my little platform, and I got my gasket. This goes on the bottom side with our little clip that goes on the bottom to hold it on. Now we have the top side of our strainer here. So what we're going to do with this is we need to put some plumber's putty around the bottom of it. So I want to get some putty and meet it up. And I normally get about a ping pong golf ball size worth of putty. So I got my putty here. I'm just going to meet it up a little bit and then I'm going to roll it out. Now you want to be careful when rolling this out, because you want to try not to hold it straight up and down in the air too much, because it's going to stretch out, it's going to string out and stretch out. But what we want to do here is we're just rolling this out nice and even. We want a nice even bead throughout the whole thing to put around our strainer. So once we get around our strainer, I just kind of take and push it into the side. Now once we get that done, we can insert it on the top. Now we want to make sure that our writing is lined up, and we're just going to insert it and press it down into place. Try to make sure that you get it nice and centered when you push it in there. So we got it pushed in nice and good. If we get it pressed in good, it shouldn't pop up when you're putting the strainer on, but sometimes it does. You want to try not to push up on the bottom of the strainer. We're just going to insert this up underneath it and press it up against the bottom of the sink so that way we can get our ring on. Now to get our ring on, I'm going to pop one side of it up. You pop one side of it up, and then follow the circle back around to the other side. Once I get to the other side, then I'll be able to pop my other side up. You want to be super careful with this ring. You don't want to pull out on it. You don't want to bend it too hard because it'll stretch it out. Once it gets stretched out, we will not be able to use it, and it will not hold up and support the weight of the disposal. So you want to be super careful not to pull out on this. So, we got our base. Just gonna push it up, push it up against the bottom of the sink so I can get my ring on. So I'm gonna get one side of my ring on. That way I can work it around the rest of the circle. Once I work it around, and it's clipped up there, the next step is I want to take my screws and screw them all the way up till that platform is sitting up nice and flush with the bottom of the sink. I kind of raise them up even. We always want to raise it up even and always tighten it evenly. So once I get these up, I'm going to go around and tighten each screw. and I just follow around in a circle, and I give one or two little turns, and then I move on to the next screw. And I just keep following that process around in a circle till it's nice and tight. So now I got them the platform nice and flush with the bottom. I'm going to go around and tighten it. Just going to do one full turn on each to tighten it. Keep following it around till it's tight. Now once you feel it start to tighten up, get a little harder to turn, that's when you know you're just about there. I try not to put a lot of pressure on the screwdriver because it's really easy to over tighten it. You just hold the screwdriver on there and turn it. Once the screwdriver pops out, that's when you know it's tight enough. Because if we over tighten this, what it's going to do is it's going to press that ring down and pop that ring off. So you want to be looking at that ring while you're tightening it too, to make sure that you're not over tightening it. So now we got these all nice and tight, so we can move on. Now this is going to press the putty up around the top of the strainer, but we're going to leave that till the end, because as you're going through this, putting your disposal on, it's going to seep out a little bit more of that putty, so I just wait for the end to clean it off. So now that we got our strainer on, our next step is getting our disposal ready. There's a few things we got to do when getting our disposal ready. One is if we are hooking our dishwasher drain pipe back up to the disposal, there could be a drain spout in the plumbing that it's hooked up to, or it could be hooked up to the disposal. If we're hooking it up to the disposal, there's going to be a knockout plug inside of here. So that means that we are going to have to punch out this plug. So if our drain line is hooked up to here, we're going to have to punch it out, which we can just use a flathead screwdriver and a hammer and hammer it through. Once it pops through, I try to grab it and clean it out and just set it to the side. The disposal's ready to chop it up, but occasionally it might get stuck under the blades, which will cause a problem, so I just take it out at the beginning so I don't have to worry about that. So, the next step we got is our drain pipe. So, we got our part to our continuous waste kit, which was on the old one. So, we have a little rubber ring that's going to go on the end to seal it in. Then we got our metal plate that goes on, along with our two screws. So, we're just going to insert it in, and put our screws in. That will seal it down, and that little rubber ring will keep it from leaking. So, now we got it on, we can tighten it. All the way down. Keep tightening until we can't tighten anymore. nice and tight. Now the last thing we got to do with the disposal is hook up the electrical. In this case, we have an appliance cord that we're going to wire in because there's an outlet down there. There can also be a house line where it's hardwired. Now generally if it's hardwired, I wait to wire it till the last when I'm getting ready to mount it to my strainer. That way I can tip it on its side. It's a little bit easier doing it that way than trying to put it up there and then put it on. Because there's limited space underneath it and it makes it harder to see. So, to get this on there, we're going to take off our screw on the bottom and our little plate. So we got our little plate off. We have our 2 wires and our little ground screw for our ground. So we have our little connector, electrical connector. What we're gonna do is spin it up on there. It's just gonna spin in and tighten into place. Now, once I do that, I can feed my cord through. Once I get my cord fed up through, I'll be able to connect my wires. Alright, now that I got my wires fed up through, I can tighten my electrical clamp down. And secure it into place. So we always want to secure our line to the appliance or to our junction box. It's always got to be secured. Now we don't want to over tighten it, we just want to tighten it down till it grips it nice and snug so it won't pull the line back out. But we don't want to over tighten it. If we over tighten it, it's going to short out the line. So, now that we got it in, we got our ground screw to put our ground under. We can tighten that down. Alright, now that we got it tightened down, we have our neutral wire. We're just going to wire cap, line them up nice and even, hold them tight, and twist our nut on till we can't twist anymore. Once we got it on, we want to give a little tug to the line just to make sure that it made a good connection and it's not going to pop out. Now we get our our hot wire. Give her a little tug. Make sure it's good. Then we just want to secure these up in there. We want to try not to push down on the cap too much because it might pop out of the cap. So we want to try to avoid pressing on the end of the cap too much. So, now we got our cord secured on there. Our next step is mounting our disposal to our strainer. So, on our strainer here, we have this little tab on the side of this. That little tab is what's going to secure it on. There's a little incline on the strainer that it's going to follow up and go up till it hits the stopper. Now there's a stopper on the strainer which is going to allow it to only go over so far. Now you don't want to try to over tighten it because it's going to spin that strainer around if you do. So I'm just going to hold it up there nice and even and line that up. Then I'll be able to twist it around. Got it up. Then I can twist it till I hit my stopper. Now we got it connected. So, our next step is rehooking up our plumbing. Get all our parts. We're going to put it back on the same way we took it off. So, we have our tailpiece, which is always going to go on the top. So, how I took it off, I'm going to have it inserted into this pipe already. Now I'm not going to tighten the nut all the way so I can adjust it, but how this is set up, I'm going to have to get this on and then turn it up till it lines up. Because we don't ever want to pull or try to bend these pieces. So in this instance, we're going to have to put it on, put it into this piece so we can spin it to have it line up. So I got my nut in my ring, putting on our disposal piece. Now I can insert this on. So I'm going to insert it on and twist it so it lines up with the strainer. Now I'm going to adjust my strainer in my distance to where it lines up perfectly. These pieces always got to line up nice and straight. We don't ever want to pull the pieces over, try to bend the pieces, hold them, and put that nut on. They always got to fit within each other and line up perfectly. So, now that I got my top piece lined up, I got my rubber fitting for the top. So I can get my strainer on. I got my top ring on. I can tighten my bottom piece. And then I can tighten my side ring as well. Now, my next fitting is my J-bend, my part of my P-trap. This is your standard P-trap, which is going to go with each other. So, I'm going to insert my J-bend on first, and I'm going to leave it a little loose, not tighten that nut up all the way, so I know where to adjust it. Now I got my little 90, and I'm going to put that on first, because that's going to let me know where my final piece is going to have to be in line up. So, I'm going to get my nut in my ring on my final piece, and I'm going to insert it into my 90. Now, I got it inserted into my 90, and I know that it's only going to go in so far. So that's going to tell me where I need to be. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to adjust my J-bend here to where I need to be. So, now that I got my J-bend lined up, I can finish tightening all my nuts. Alright, now I got all my pieces tightened up. My next step is I want to get my drain hose hooked back up. So I got my little clip. Gonna put on it. Tighten it on. I normally try to get mine on it first. Makes it a little bit easier in case it pops off. So, now I got mine on. Get my clamp on. Now our final step is we're just going to have to plug it in. So, once we plug it in, now we're going to have to clean the top of our strainer out, get all of our plumber's putty out, and it should just peel off nice and evenly, but occasionally it won't. There'll be a little bit of excess that we're just going to have to scrape off, and you can use your finger with a paper towel, or just use your finger. You just want to refrain from trying to use something like a screwdriver, because then there's a good chance we're going to scratch the sink. So, now that we got everything hooked up, we would just have to test it. So, to test it, one, we're going to turn the disposal on to make sure that it works, and second, we're going to have to fill up the sink to do a pressure test. We're going to fill each side of the sink up halfway, and then drain each one separately to see if there's any leaks. Anytime we're messing with the plumbing, we always have to do a pressure test. That's going to tell us if there's a leak and show us where it is. Just running water down the drain won't necessarily show if there's going to be a leak, so we'd have to do the pressure test. So once we do the pressure test, we can turn the disposal on, which we always want it on while the water's running. You don't ever want to run it just by itself dry, as it'll burn that motor out. So to do our pressure test, we're going to want to fill up both sides of the sink, so that way we can drain each side since we disassembled the whole plumbing. So we're going to want to fill up the sink about halfway. Once we fill it up halfway, we can drain it and look at all our connections underneath to make sure that it's good to go. Normally it's just going to take a couple minutes. Make sure we've got it plugged up good. And let her fill up. Now that we got our sink filled up, now we are good to test our connections underneath. So we are going to want to pull our drain plug and look at all our connections make sure that there's not a leak anywhere. So we're going to let it flow down and carefully look where all our nuts are connected. It's looking good so far. We are completely drained out. Do not see any leaks. So it looks like we're going to be good to go. Now that we drained it and we're good, we're going to want to test our disposal and make sure that it's working. Always have that water running while we're testing it. So it's on, running, and remember we always test that with the water running down it, as if not, it's going to burn out that motor. So once it's working, we pressure test it, we got no leaks, then we are good to clean everything up, take our photographs, and then discuss with the customer about the install and our survey.